Hello there, viewers. Welcome to the show. You're watching the first ever episode of One-Take Shakespeare. I'm your host, Penny, and I'm going to break it down for you in one continuous take. Now, normally on this show, I'm going to be talking about a play, but before I get into that, I want to cover the core mechanic of Shakespeare. Iambic pentameter. Okay, now these are big-ish words, and I'm not out to confuse you with scholarness. So let's take it one word at a time. An iamb is a collection of two syllables, the first one unstressed, the second one stressed. For example, the word hello is an iamb. We mark the beats like this: unstressed, stressed. So if you see those marks on anything, that's what they mean, an iamb. This is called a poetic foot. I'm not actually sure why. It might be because of like the measurement, or maybe because they kind of walk. I don't know. There are actually 5 kinds of poetic foot: the iamb, the trochee, the spondee, the dactyl, and the anapest, but right now we're just worried about the iamb. Pentameter is actually pretty straightforward. You have penta, meaning 5, and meter, meaning, measure. So 5 measures, or if you like, 5 feet. So a line of iambic pentameter is a line of 5 iambs. For example, how happy some or other some can be. Iambic pentameter. It's pretty easy. Elizabethan playwrights, like Shakespeare, wrote in iambic pentameter a lot. And, not without reason either. It's a really good meter to speak in. The rhythm is really natural to English. It's regular enough that you can build up some good momentum, but the 5-beat line gives you enough of a pause at the end that you don't sound sing-song, and you can breathe, which is useful if you're going to be talking for 2 hours. Iambic pentameter was made popular by Christopher Marlowe, who was a pretty crazy guy, but more about him later. Marlowe wrote really, really regular verse. Ben Jonson, another contemporary playwright of Shakespeare's, called it Marlowe's mighty line. It was a huge hit, and it made for some completely epic speeches. But, okay, the thing about Marlowe's plays is that listening to 2 hours of really, really regular verse is kind of like standing next to the bass speaker at a concert. It's awesome, but after 2 hours, you kind of feel like your brain is going to turn into jelly and run out your ears. So where Shakespeare had the advantage over Marlowe, apart from the fact that he didn't die prematurely from a knife to the eye, was that he shook it up a little. If you look at Shakespeare's verse, you'll see all kinds of stuff like irregular endings and irregular beginnings and lines that are too short and lines that are too long and elisions and caesures and adjustments and all kinds of crazy stuff. So let's talk about some of that. The thing you're going to see the most often, that's the most obvious, is an irregular ending. Some people call this a feminine ending or a weak ending, and I'm not going to go into the unfortunate implications there, but it all means the same thing, and all it is an extra unstressed syllable on the end of the line. To be or not to be, that is the question. Watch out for these, because they give you clues to the character's mental state. If someone has a lot of them, like Hamlet, it's a pretty good indication that their thoughts are not organized. Maybe they're indecisive, or maybe they're crazy, or maybe they're just thinking out loud, whatever. You also get weird things at the beginnings of lines. Sometimes, in the first foot of the line, the 2 syllables are flipped and the stressed syllable comes first. This is called a trochee. If an iamb is hello, a trochee would be yellow. When you have a trochee where you're supposed to have an iamb, that is called trochaic inversion. Sounds kind of like sci-fi. Captain, we're experiencing trochaic inversion. Oh no, quickly, engage the auxiliary thrusters and shift into warp 5. Richard III starts with one of these. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of York. Trochaic inversion. Trochaic inversions don't actually have to come at the beginning of lines, but when you put them there, that's a good way to give the whole line a little extra emphasis. You also see a bunch of stuff in the middle of lines. One of my favorites is elision. This is when 2 syllables are sort of smooshed together into one to make them fit the line. For example, it is the east and Juliet is the sun. Okay, now normally Juliet is 3 syllables, Juliet, but for that line, it's functionally 2. It fits. Usually, you see elision on unstressed syllables, but they don't have to be. For example, in Macbeth, Macduff says, "Did heaven look on and would not take their part?" Bam, right on the first stressed syllable. Now there's all sorts of other stuff that Shakespeare puts in the middle of lines, like enjambment, which is when a sentence runs over onto the next line, and its sort of counterpart, caesura, which is when a sentence cuts off in the middle of the line. And then you have shared lines and hypermetric lines and pauses, and you know, honestly, there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with verse, and if I sat here and explained them all, this video would be like 2 hours long, and honestly, if you're gonna spend that long watching something about Shakespeare, watch a play. They're a lot more interesting. Okay, before I call it an episode, I'll show you one more thing that's really cool that you can do with verse. If you take a line of iambic pentameter and scan it, you will notice that the stressed syllables fall on the important words in the line. For example, let's take this line from A Midsummer Night's Dream. "The more my prayer, the lesser is my grace." Now, let's scan this. "The more my prayer," there's some elision for you right there, "the lesser is my grace." There, scansion marks. Now, if we just look at the stressed syllables, that's the ones marked with these little dashes, we get this: more prayer, less is grace. Yeah, okay, it's not, you know, grammatically perfect, but you totally still get the gist of the line. Now, just for kicks, let's take a look at the unstressed syllables. The, my, the, my. Yeah, I got nothing. This sounds like, you know, when you're awkwardly trying to get a sentence started and you have no idea what the first word is even supposed to be. Not that that ever happens to me. Anyway. The point is, once you know this, you can use this to figure out what the important words in the line are and what the line means. Let's go back to Hamlet's line for a second. To be or not to be, that is the question. And usually that's how you're going to hear people deliver it. To be or not to be, that is the question. Not, you know, what's the meaning of life, or like, did I leave the stove on? No, to be or not to be. But if you scan it regularly without the trochaic inversion, you get this. To be or not to be, that is the question. Like, it's no use telling yourself that that isn't the question, because it is. Sooner or later, it all comes down to that one inescapable either-or choice. To be or not to be. Yeah. That is the question. You've been watching One-Take Shakespeare. See you next time.